There we go. All right, yeah. So welcome again. Delighted to be with you. We're going to have a practice on yoga and strength conditioning right now. And we're actually going to start with one of the first activities we began this series with. We're going to sit on this block so that it's like a bench in this direction. So you take a seat and put the block so that when you're sitting on it, you're kind of on the front edge of the block. We're not sitting far back. You're on the front edge, and the block, if you tip your hips forward, you'll feel the block just touching the sitting bones and then the top of the hamstrings right there when the sitting bones become muscle, that's your hamstring insertions there. And when you're sitting on it upright, you're going to feel the inner edges of the sitting bones, this spot right here, because the sitting bones will rest over the little beveled edge of the block. If you roll back, you're likely to feel your tailbone kind of slightly touching the block, but there's about 3 inches of block probably behind you beyond that. Okay, rest your hands in your lap and you can close your eyes. Start breathing in, breathing out. Inhale, arriving. Exhale, getting more grounded. Bring your awareness down into the points of contact with the block, especially the 2 sitting bones. Since we're sitting upright and we're neutral, you don't feel the tailbone nor the pubic bones touching the block right now. But where you feel the sitting bones, you can imagine the pubic bone in front and the tailbone behind. And start breathing into the pelvic floor to the best of your ability. You could imagine that as you breathe in, the sitting bones, pubic bone, tailbone, they would kind of spread apart. And as you breathe out, they come gently towards each other. They get more connected, and the muscle tone of the pelvic floor increases. Muscle tone on the inhale is more elastic at the pelvic floor. So that your mental health and your physical health are connected to your pelvic floor. So this is a subtle activity, but an important one. Now, with the breath, as you inhale, tip the pelvis forward, you're going to feel some of those bony landmarks moving over the edge of the block. And with the exhale, tip the pelvis backwards, and you're going to feel the back of the sitting bones and then part of the tailbone. And then inhale, roll forward. And exhale, roll back. It might be tender, and it could be tender on one side more than the other. That is actually pretty common. So when you're inhaling to roll forward, try to touch the places that are tender, touch with a little more kindness, a little more appreciation. Its tenderness is not there to annoy you, but to notify you. Do that one more time. Inhale to come forward. And exhale to roll back. Come to neutral. And then slide down a little bit to your right. Up and over, slide down a little bit to your left. These bony landmarks, again, they might feel tender. We're going to go side to side just a couple times. So you're going to be aware that there are muscle insertions there on these bony landmarks. And it's possible, again, that you've got one area that's more sensitive than another. Let's roll over to the left and then think of a diagonal and go like front, right, and then left, back. So we'll do that a couple of times. I can definitely say for myself, having had 3 major hip surgeries following a car accident, my most recent one was in September of this past year, that when the surgery happened on one side or the other, definitely that side of the pelvic floor was more affected than the other. So as we go back and left for you, that's my right. We go forward and right for you, it's my left. And that's the surgery that I had. And I can definitely see, I can feel into it, it's more sensitive on that side. Let's come to center and then think of the other diagonal. So front left for you, right for me, and back right. And as you're doing that, again, kindness, appreciation, whatever is coming to those sensations, we want it to be like, okay, can I come to understand you? Can I know why you're here? And can I help some of this tenderness to resolve? Particularly because our intrinsic core strength is tied into the pelvic floor, is an essential part of that. And it's also tied into come to center. It's tied into our mental health and well-being. Now let's take the 2 feet out from there. So you're sitting in a kind of squatting position right now. And see if we can roll up a little bit on the sitting bones and roll back a little bit on the tailbone. Since we're sitting on the front of the block, it should not be the case that when you roll back, you tip off the block. Also that the block should be stable is my great hope, that you have a stable block. If you happen to purchase a block that's more narrow than the block that I have, because they do make those, I don't know why they make those. I don't recommend those, mostly because they're kind of wobbly, right? So if you have a more narrow block, this is not going to be a good fit. And we want you to get the block that is the right dimension, which is a standard yoga block. I'll show you this one again in just a moment. So one more time, roll forward. And one more time, roll back. And then let's see if you come up to standing in Uttanasana. What did that feel like in terms of the flexibility that you might have just gained by releasing at the pelvic floor? Rise up to standing, and just for show and tell, this is a standard yoga block, and I think this might be, it's like 3.5 or 4 inches this way. This one might be 5 or 6. It's kind of hard to tell. This one might be 8 or 9, but this is definitely, it's not 2 inches wide. It's 3 or 4 inches wide. So standard yoga block like this. Okay, let's take the foam roller, please. And lay it on your mat. And take a seat on it. And come into a cross-legged position. So when you're sitting cross-legged now, what you're going to be rolling when you go front to back is some of the muscles of the pelvis. When you roll back, don't fall off, but you're going to roll right back there to the hamstrings. And since the legs are turned out, you're going to get the lateral hamstring. That means the more outside hamstring. When you roll forward, you may feel your sitting bones and maybe part of your tailbone. Do it a couple times more. This should feel more gentle than what we were just doing. And now please switch your ankles. So sometimes it'll feel different when you go forward or back based on any hip differences you have or hip imbalances that might be there. So that's sort of warming up the tissues around the sitting bones and the greater trochanter over on the side. You can feel part of that as you roll right there, the back of the trochanter, and then the sitting bones. Okay, so now come to where you can lean back and put your hands on the floor. Cross your right ankle over your left knee and roll from center to the right. As you're rolling this one, what you can do is go center and right, but I'm going to add a little bit of front to back to mine also. So it feels like, we're kind of improvising a little bit. And as you roll front to back, side to side, let it be a fun, even a playful exploration. What is there for you to discover and the outer right hip. And then find a spot where it feels like, okay, it's a little bit juicy. So right now for me, that's probably on the incision for my most recent hip surgery. We're just going to go a little bit back and forth like tiny pulses to say hello to that spot. Little bitty pulses. Back to center and sit up tall on your roller once again and roll a little bit front to back. So if you do it like you're squatting right now, because we have the knees up, when you're going front to back, you're going over symmetrical position, and you can feel right behind the sitting bones, and then there's the tailbone right there, and then you can feel right in front of the sitting bones. And okay, now second side, we're going to lean back and cross the left ankle over your right knee, and we're going to roll center and left. When you're rolling like that, you can add some of that front to back, east to west at the same time. So it feels like, oh, a little bit playful, a little bit of coordination, a little bit like a dance. What is there to discover? Again, when you find the spot, like for me, it's interesting, this is so much better. And the spot that I have today is not actually where the incision that is still there, but not many, many years healed. It's in a different spot around the outside of the trochanter. So see what you can discover for yourself and make these tiny pulses. And then bring that one also back to center and rise up to sitting on the roller and go front to back again. Okay, there you are. Now let's check our Uttanasana once more. So rise up to standing. And when you come up, what you might do is sense, okay, if I put the feet so that they are hip distance apart, or about as, for some of us, as wide as the block, and then come forward and down, what is the experience of your flexibility there now? You lean your hips to the left and to the right and see if you can sense, sorry, we didn't have a post and pre opportunity here. We just have the post opportunity. But as you go side to side, is there, generally speaking, some myofascial freedom in the outer hips to go side to side like that? And if you bring the hips to center and walk your torso to the side and around in another half circle the other way, do you feel like there's generally a good glide? And bring that back to center, and please rise up to standing. Okay, let's keep the roller, but we're going to put it aside for right now. Please take your blanket, and mine got a little bit messy, so I'm going to do it again. Fold it in half and then in half one more time, and step your toes up onto your blanket and come down into a calf stretch like this. Now, if you place your feet on this blanket, so the mounds of the toes are on the blanket, but the toes themselves extend beyond the blanket. So if you lift and flare the toes, they are not touching the blanket. Keep your heels on the floor. But as you lift and spread the toes, imagine you could see daylight between each of those toes. And then press your toes down and curl them over the blanket. And then inhale, raise the toes up and spread them out. And exhale, curl your toes down over the blanket. Inhale, spread the toes wide. And exhale, press down over the blanket. And do that one more time. As you press the toes down, then bring your torso upright and step backwards off of your blanket. And let's check and see, okay, now how are things feeling between you and your connection with the ground? What is happening there? You might even feel like your arches have a little bit of myofascial release because the pressure of the skin and the muscles over the blanket right there did do some massaging. Now let's check in with our intrinsic core strength. And one of the ways that I like to do that is, yes, sitting on the ball, but we're actually going to start that this afternoon with a reclined position. So let me put my blanket aside. Gives me a little bit more room in my room. And lie on your back. Make sure that's not going to fall. Lie on your back with your feet up on the ball. And I'd like you to put the ball so that you really just have your heels, not so much your calves, but your heels up on the ball. I mean, the calves might touch because that's the size of you and the size of the ball, but you have your heels there. Okay. And then just thinking of this casually as when you go for a walk, you don't think, okay, pelvic floor, sitting bones, all the things, or as casually as climbing the stairs to the garden, you don't think about each thing unless you're in a period of vulnerability or rehabilitation, you might be thinking about it, but let's think casually. Can you press the heels down and raise the hips up? And is the ball relatively stable, particularly if you don't use your arms? We can pretend we're sleepwalking, right? Can the ball be relatively stable right there? And roll that down. Relax your arms and make a commitment to keep them relaxed so you don't have to raise them if you don't want to. But now let's see if you bring your left knee to your chest and you press the right foot down and you think of it kind of casually. Can you raise up and is the ball relatively stable? And lower down from that one. Place the left foot. And you're going to ask again, as you press up, is the ball relatively stable? Again, could you sleepwalk if you wanted to? And the arms be relaxed even if they're touching the floor. And then bring that down. Now, I've had a lot of students over the years for them doing this, whether it's 2 feet or 1 foot. They've been trembling. The ball actually kind of shimmers. It moves a little bit when they lift up. And it's not that they're not strong people because they have this outer body strength, but when the ball wiggles like that on the up or the down, when it's not stable, it's not usually about your global muscles here and here. It is usually about more the intrinsic core muscles. So to help to retrain that, even if that was easeful for you, let's do a little bit of retraining. Put your heels on the ball so that your feet are wider than hip distance by just a touch, and turn the toes out like you're doing a little Fonzie. Remember the Fonz, like that. And let's just roll the ball a little bit side to side. So when you're rolling, please keep the pelvis stable. So both sides of the pelvic bones are going to be on the floor. If you were to put your fingers on your hip bones, they are stable right now when you go left to right. So your leg bones are moving in your hip sockets. And you may feel some of these sort of oblique muscles or transverse abdominis in the lower hemisphere of the abdomen. You might even be able to feel it up near your floating ribs. Now make the movement smaller and smaller. Slowly, smaller and smaller. So you make the movement smaller, smaller, and come to the place where you're visualizing the movement. You're not actually doing it, you're just imagining that you're going to do it. Imagine you're rolling the ball side to side. Note that in the imagining, your most local system, your intrinsic system, responds to what you imagine. It's called the anticipatory system. So if you anticipate that your ball is going to roll side to side, the system should turn on. Okay, now relax. And then we're going to start with anticipating or visualizing. So imagine that you're going to roll this ball side to side without actually doing it. And notice how certain muscles start to want to turn on. If you were going to roll this ball side to side smoothly, and when you have a sense that those muscles have turned on, just take a very slow, small range rocking of the ball side to side. And as you're doing that, let the rock get a little bit wider, but with the same grace or elegance. You can really notice, especially if you go slow and steady, the breath is coordinating with you. Can you notice when you go to one side or the other, there's like a transfer of responsibilities happening in the abdomen, one side of your obliques to the other side. And then bring that back to center. So you kind of layered on some things there with visualizing and then exploring. And I hope that felt cohesive to you. Now we're going to put the feet up so that they point straight up towards the ceiling. And as you inhale, press your heels down and imagine yourself raising the pelvis up to what we call low bridge pose, like this. And then imagine yourself bringing your left knee to your chest. Imagine yourself placing that left foot back on the ball. And imagine yourself bringing your right knee to your chest. And I can tell that would be a big deal for my left leg right now, still recovering. And then imagine placing the right heel back on the ball and roll yourself down. And let's give that a little bit of a whirl and see what we can do. So we're going to inhale, raise up, lift your tailbone, energize the back of the pelvis and the hamstrings. And then exhale, bring your left knee into your chest. If at all possible, keep everything smooth along the rest of your body, so the left knee did not disturb the whole experience. Place the left foot back on the ball. Visualize the left leg supporting your weight. Bring your right knee to your chest. No need to clench the teeth or furrow the eyebrows. We're just exploring. And place the right foot back on the ball. Let's go. Exhale, left knee in. Inhale, return. And exhale, right knee in. And inhale, return. Okay, left. Return. And one more on the right. Return. And roll that down and bring your ball now in. So you can put your calves over the top of the ball. That kind of strengthening around the backside of the body is really essential. That you are getting the deep six there, and the glutes and the pelvic floor, the hamstrings, all those things together, plus working with your intrinsic core for your balance in that process. Okay, let's put the ball now so that it's going to include your heels and parts of your calves. So you've got a little bit more ball underneath the ball for yourself. And as you press up, now see if you can keep the hips level, don't let them drop down, and bring the ball towards you with your heels. And then take it back out. Your hips might go up slightly like mine are doing because I have a tall ball for my height, but I don't want the hips to drop down. So exhale as you roll in. Inhale, roll out. Exhale, glide in. Inhale, roll out. One more. And exhale, lower down. Bring the ball in. Cross your ankles if that makes it easier. And let the effort you were making, let that relax now so it becomes ease. I like pairing that with the breath, where the movement and the body, they get paired like that together. And so when you're strengthening back through here, it's going to contribute to things like your overall strength and balance in some yoga poses, but also because so many of us have sitting jobs or sitting lives, you can imagine that this isn't a particularly toned part of the body. In fact, it might be tight, but not toned. And so now we're going to take it one more time through the same. So put your heels and your calves up there. Relax the arms. And as you inhale, go up to low bridge. Exhale, high bridge. Inhale, low bridge. Exhale, high bridge. Continue with your breath cycle. And then exhale and roll that down. Okay, this time, take the ball away, place your feet flat on the floor. And notice where your mind feels in relationship with your body. Okay, and then roll to your side and come on up. So let's address the back of the body. Now we're going to address a little bit the front of the body, how we find stability there. And those things where you're doing knee to chest experiences, that can be done lying on your back or being on your front side. So what I'm going to ask us to do here, excuse me, coming up to standing. Now, the space that I'm playing in, I don't have a lot of room, so I have to figure out how to get on my ball so that when I walk forward, I have my hands on the floor in a kind of plank pose, and I have my shins on the ball. So what I do is I straddle the ball like this and put my chest down on it. And then when I walk forward, you see how I brought my legs together back there? So this will look a little bit like doing plank pose right now. Okay, and so in this first plank pose, we're only going to rock forward and back with the knees, the shins, or the feet on the ball. And this little bit of rocking is going to require both your intrinsic core and then your obliques and your rectus abdominis. And then you're going to raise the hips and bring the knees in towards the chest. It's kind of like doing child's pose or downward dog pose. And then take the ball out, come to plank pose, and see if you can rock a little bit, front to back. Keep the base of the skull lifted and the deep inner belly also toned and lifted. So there's no sense of overarching the lower back. And then bring the knees in and bring your hips back towards your heels. And then once more, roll the ball out and come to plank pose. Now we have this opportunity to walk backwards in plank pose, and then you have to check and see when you are close to the furniture behind you or the wall or the door, and then rise up to standing. Okay. So that's a first sort of exploration into doing plank pose with the ball, and then rolling the ball in and out. Yeah, bending the knees, taking the hips up and over. So that experience, we can also do it where we start in hands on the floor, we put our shins up on the ball, and then we're going to send the ball backwards. So to do this version, you come down and you place one foot up on the ball like this. Okay, so let's get the two hands set like plank pose. Let's place one foot up on the ball, include the top of your foot and your shin, and possibly your knee, depending on the size of the ball. Press down with that leg against the ball and pick up the other knee, and then place your foot. Now you have a longer lever because you have the ball further back than it was a moment ago. Stabilize and touch the opposite shin back down. So when you've got one foot up, in my case, the ball's a little bit tall, so it's also a nice hip flexor stretch when I reach back. But I want you to be aware, if the ball's tall for you, that doesn't mean that you can't use it. It means you have to be aware of the size of the ball and your own body structure. Okay, so let's press into both arms and raise up. Step the right foot up on the ball. Rock a little bit front to back. And then step down with the opposite shin. Maybe you'll roll the ball back and get a little hip flexor stretch. Then come forward to your hands and knees, press down, place the other foot back up, rock a bit, and then step down, and perhaps you'll glide backwards, little hip flexor stretch. And then bring your left foot in, or whichever foot is up, bring it down and in and come to kneeling or sitting. Hopefully your ball is going to behave, or you can keep track of it. And then just notice what's happening in the front hemisphere of the body, and where does your mind end up in doing these kinds of activities. Okay, now let's take ourselves up on the ball. If you sit on it like this, and then come to lying on the upper back of the ball, or I should say your upper back on the top of the ball. Now again, I have a larger ball for myself here this afternoon. So that means that my hips are going to be lower than my shoulders right now. And that's because of the size of the ball. So if you tried to make the hips and the shoulders level, one way to do that is to walk a little forward on a ball like this that's taller than you are. And we'll take the arms out in a T shape. Okay, now with the hips up at about the same height as the knees, lengthen your tailbone towards your knees and simply rock a little bit front to back. Rock back. Return to the starting position. Rock back. Return to your starting position. As you rock back, perhaps you feel your hamstrings and your glutes. And when you get comfortable with that, then raise the arms up overhead. They're no longer playing a balance role. As you come forward, feel the glutes and hamstrings. As you roll back, maintain that tone in the glutes and hamstrings, even though you're elongating and opening the upper body. And then rock once more until the knees are over the heels. And now we're going to practice walking ourselves up to sitting on the ball. So walk all the way up. And let's check and see. With all that you've activated there, if you do sit up on the ball, you feel like you can balance. Sometimes think about it like we have a circuit board and we're just turning on certain circuits again in the body and asking, okay, can I balance now? You got some new skills in what we were doing there. And I'm going to add another skill for you today. So let's take a look at this one. Let me just get a sip of water first. We come up to stand. I'll do it with my right foot forward, left foot back. You're going to need 2 blocks. And you put the left foot up on the ball, as I've just done there. So when you're standing here now, the left foot up on the ball means that the pelvis, when it's neutral, you might have a little bit of a hip flexor stretch going on there. And the toes, because I have a tall ball, my toes are not on the very top of the ball. And then we bend at the front knee, reach the ball backwards with the left leg. Place the hands, and then we glide back, and this is called your basic lunge. And you'll probably feel your hip flexors, maybe the inner groin, a nice stretch. We can rock front to back with it. You're welcome to join me. If you were just watching the demo, this is a good time to join, actually. And one thing we might not always be aware of, so we're going into an activity, like going on a journey in a new city, and we might not always remember, how did we get where we went? How do we get back home? So how do we get up to standing from here? You're going to press into the front leg and use the glutes and hamstrings that you were using before to rise back up to stand. And you bring that ball back with you. Just a second. You can come in. Yeah, that's okay. Now we'll do the other side. So put your left foot forward, put the right foot up on the high point of the ball. So this is my rehab side. I'm still working on it. So this one might wobble. So you first stand up, organize the pelvis, take the tailbone down, breathe in, and then glide the ball backwards slowly. Keep your front knee in line with your front toes. Come down to your blocks. We want to start with the left shin pretty vertical here, even if your left thigh is not horizontal. And then we can rock a little bit front to back. Hello to your hip flexors. And then before we come up to stand, you want to have the toes of the left foot pressed down, just like on the blanket roll earlier. The heel is pressing down. Engage your hamstrings and your calves, and then find your glutes and roll the ball back in to where you started, and then step down. Okay, so that's another way, another skill set that we're going to be building into. doing that particular thing is a building block, it's also an activity of its own. So if you hear me say building block and you're like, oh my gosh, what comes after that? There's more to come. But that particular glide right there that we were just doing is something that's going to challenge our balance and also increase our capacity for balance and for uncertainty, right? Because we're taking this ball backwards. Can I practice my relationship to the unknown? We're coming down. How far are the blocks? Can I take care? You might have seen that I touched my finger to my shelf because I needed a little bit extra stability for my left leg. Of course, you make those accommodations for yourself as well. Okay, so let's put these guys aside. And we're going to finish with what I call basking. Then we'll come down to the floor with the foam roller. So come over your ball backwards. Come over. You can also think about enjoying, and your vestibular system may not have had this activity recently, so please be thoughtful. What you can do is rock a little bit front to back and imagine that the arms are kind of like seaweed. And reach over, overhead here. Some of you will find that you could straighten your legs. Some of you will find that you can't quite straighten the legs. It will matter how inflated your ball is, how large it is, how tall you are, your flexibility, all the things. Then I'd like you to try this. Let's bend the knees. Lift your head, look forward in the direction of the knees, and then rotate onto your side. I went onto my left side. And you can keep the feet where they were, so they also turned. And lengthen. Go ahead and hold the top wrist with the bottom hand. And I like this one to also have a little bit of a rock. This feels really soothing. Okay, and then exhale, come on to your back. Okay, so here is where we were when we went to the left side. Now we're going to go to the other side. So you're looking forward. You've got the feet and shins wider than your hips, and you go onto your side. And that means that your feet are separated. And you can lounge over the ball sideways. Let's take the top wrist with the bottom hand. Breathe along the side of your waist. Allow yourself to deepen the breath and to feel even in between the rib cage, maybe the outer hip, the side waist. And roll that also onto your back. Look forward towards your knees and walk yourself backwards up to sitting on the ball. And I'm going to store my ball to the side here. Stop right there. Okay. Please bring your roller down to the floor. We'll give the whole body some goodness today. So with your roller, please lie on your back. Clasp your hands. Please, if you have a long ponytail, hold on to it. If you have dangling clothing, tuck it in. I just tucked mine into my yoga tights. And let's roll the upper back here. rolling, when you're going north to south like this, just consider what's happening left to right. You don't have to roll left to right, but you may have one part of the upper back is a little more stiff than the other. And if there's a kind of like a little juicy spot, you can make small pulsations again. Something you can also consider is that you have to keep the hips lifted to do this. And you might see if you have the capacity to pick up one foot. So you'll notice that the other leg, the hip and hamstrings are driving. You can switch the feet if you haven't yet. Sometimes I like to give myself a little complexity and I cross the opposite ankle over. And then let's bring that one to a little close. And open the elbows, open the upper back. Please put the roller at your shoulder blades and hold your head. Raise yourself forward and up to sitting. Spin about like you're breakdancing. Put the roller, lie back. I imagine that you're going to have some sore muscles tomorrow, the kind of sore that tells you that you use muscles in different places in the body. So right now, what you can do is lay the arms out, bring your head to center, close your eyes. Everything to relax. So let's imagine first the outer skin of the body softens. The myofascial layer relaxes. It's been hydrated and fluids have been moved about through the body. So areas that might have been depleted are getting renewed. Relax the muscles of your body, the muscles you know, the soft tissue, the connective tissue. Maybe you don't know those ones as well, but in every part of the body and all of the joints. Deeper than the muscles are the bones. So just imagining all the bones of your body get to relax as well. Deeper than that is the organ system of your body. Deeper than that, we have the innervation, circulation, respiration. Deeper than that is the inner space of the body. Neither the muscles nor the bones, nor the arteries or veins. Deeper than all of that, the space. Deeper yet than that sense of space is your essential self, that which is most indwelling, that which hasn't been harmed by any of these life events or body injuries, that which is awaiting your return. And you feel that you've been able to return to that inner sense of home and keep your mind resting right there. If you were gazing at the open sky, and even if a bird passes through, your attention is still with the sky. Seeing the quality of the mind that observes this essential nature to which we come back home from this practice. Roll your head side to side. Wiggle your fingers. Wiggle your toes. Just bend your knees and place your feet up on the roller. Scooch it out of your way. And roll to your side to return to sitting. Take the block. To your seat. See if your plumb line might feel any bit different. Raise your hands to your heart. Thank you all very much. Thank you for being here. Namaste. Close the recording so we can be personal together.